Okay, so all right, let me ask about some different parts of the argument.
Yeah.
So the first about is the idea that you don't want the politics of Israel and Palestine to spread here. So what about the argument that they inevitably have to spread here because we're giving Israel the weapons, we're giving Israel the diplomatic protection,
Yeah.
so that inevitably America is implicated. We are an actor in that faraway conflict.
Right. Well, I'm not saying that nobody should debate the Middle East in the United States.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is that the debate needs to be contained. When it's being spread to offices that have no say over foreign policy, that's a kind of conflict extension that I think leads to these kind of poisonous situations where people can't live together. I think we need to be able to debate these issues and have the possibility of political change for people who want to change our policy without it becoming this totalizing cycle of hatred that it's become in the Middle East.
So for you, the distinction between him running for mayor is what makes it different than if he was running for, let's say, Congress, where they are involved
Right. If he was running for Congress, I think his positions on foreign policy would be relevant. Now, I wouldn't want that to be the entirety of the debate around him, but I think the position on his foreign policy should be is it's not what he's running on. It's not what he has control over, and that's not what you should be voting for him on.
Okay, I mean, obviously, you're totally right that mayors don't have a lot of say over foreign policy. But I mean, if we were to think back to the anti-apartheid movement in the 1980s, where the movement to boycott and divest from South Africa, it was trying to get city councils and mayors to make symbolic statements, but probably also to divest funds. I mean, I think actually there was a little mini controversy in New York about whether Brad Land or the city controller may have actually done something different with the New York City funds, not, I don't know, that would have had an impact on Israel. So, well, obviously to a much lesser degree, but aren't there ways even that a New York mayor inevitably actually that New York City policies also have an impact, economic relationships with Israel? And we wouldn't say that the anti-apartheid movement was wrong to try to get cities to divest their pension funds, let's say from South Africa, would we?
No, but I don't actually. I mean, I think in some ways you're looking at the issue from the reverse end of the telescope that I am. I
Mm-hmm.
think the attempt to enforce these financial boycotts are in many ways the goal is the kind of spreading and totalization of the conflict. It's not a byproduct. It's a way of having so that you can't say the policies of this town, this university, this foundation are separate from the Middle East. We have to agree to disagree. It's to say we can't agree to disagree. One of us must prevail. We have to impose our vision or your vision on every part of American society. And the minimal financial leverage created by these boycotts is the tool by which people do that. But I'm opposed to that.
But again, even if the amount of money isn't that big and it practically is not going to make a huge difference,
Right.
why shouldn't, if you have resources that the city, that the mayor, the city council controls, that are going overseas or going to corporations that are doing involved in things overseas, whether it's bad things that happen in China or anywhere else, why isn't it a moral position to say we would want our money to be used in ways that don't hurt people?
Because it forces everyone to have an agreement about what that is, and I don't think that's realistic. I think all that is a recipe for the kind of conflict extension that I'm describing. I mean, I think yes, if you could potentially have some kind of consensus, some kind of social consensus about that, then you can do that. But you obviously can't, and I don't think anybody really thinks you can. I think it's just an attempt by one group of people to create a kind of social dominance structure over another kinds of people. So I just fundamentally object to that political mode in which the activists are operating.
I mean, I think you are right that you wouldn't get a consensus because these are very polarizing and very fraught issues. But why is the fact that an issue is polarizing and you don't have a consensus around it? I mean, I understand that you don't want that polarization to lead to violence, obviously, but the fact that it's heated and it divides people along ideological grounds and even to some degree along, let's say, identity grounds. I mean, lots of issues do that. Why is that illegitimate in this case?
I mean, I just think you have ways for people to argue and debate and express politics, but I feel like this is a mode of politics that is that violates, I think, my kind of liberal sense of how a society should be structured, right? That it really is much more like a conflict over religion than it is about politics, right? People relate to this set of issues in religious ways, usually quite literally Muslims versus Jews. Now, granted, not all Jews and not all Muslims are lined up across it in the exact same way. But, the liberalism was created so that people of different religions could just find ways to coexist in society and to limit the spheres of conflict. And I think that actually applies pretty well to this. Like, we have to find ways to be able to get along here. And I think this impulse to extend this conflict to everywhere is not going to lead to the victory that the advocates think it will. It's just going to lead to, I just think I see it as importing the cycle of hatred and yes, violence that you see in the Middle East.
Right. But I mean, it could be that the hatreds are produced by what government does, by the fact that the US government is acting, even the city in a smaller way, by what the US government does. And it's acting whether it takes the position that our money should go to Israel or not. So essentially, your position, which is that basically it should be off limits, it seems to me not necessarily prevent people from having hatred, because they're still going to see that their city, like their federal government, although at a smaller level, is implicated in the things that make them really upset.
I mean, is Mamdani promising to boycott Israel? Is that even part of his program?
That's actually a really good question, John. I don't know. I mean, I know as a state senator, he passed legislation in the state legislature that would have prevented New York. I think it was basically had to do with settlements. And I think that the tax exemption that you get in New York State for sending money to settlements or something. So I don't know the question on the city. So you've stumped me. But another version of it might be, let's think about it from this point of view. Let's say he has to deal with Columbia University, right? So when Eric Adams responded to Columbia, and sent in the police, he made a series of statements that clearly betrayed a certain view about Israel and about the relationship between the encampments and anti-Semitism. So as someone who's going to have to oversee that kind of thing, isn't it again kind of like almost inevitable that a mayor is not going to be able to completely separate a certain perspective about Israel-Palestine from how he responds to things that are happening in New York?
Well, no, that's exactly what I want the mayor to be able to do. I want them to be able to make a decision about a situation like Colombia without it being an advancement of his foreign policy positions. You should be balancing concerns about free speech and the rights of students to study without disruption and following the rules of the university in a fair, content neutral way without it just being an excuse to advance your political cause.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that argues for the point that I'm making, which is that when you're framing it as an extension of foreign policy, you're undermining the principles that it should actually be grounded in.
This has been a free preview of my conversation. If you'd like to hear the rest and support my work, please consider subscribing at peterbeinart.substack.com.